Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Today we're going to talk about a few things, mostly focused around speculation, but with a lot of reason to believe why this may be the case. I'm of course talking about the fact that it is very possible that we'll start to see more race packs in Warhammer 3 than we have in Warhammer 1 and 2, and there's a lot of theories around that. So without further ado, let's begin. So the Total War Warhammer series has always firmly been rooted around the 8th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battle. That is the main case, however keep in mind that they have been able to break it every now and then, introducing long dead legendary characters, some units from a setting which they seem to want to avoid, and of course with the Warhammer 3's eventual launch, the eventual release of Grand Cathay, a faction that's never had an official army book, and pretty much next to no models were ever released in the 40-ish years of the Warhammer Fantasy franchise. Now, if we look at it from an 8th edition standing point, most of the races and factions have already been released, and they are pretty much complete in terms of missing units. Some of them still have a bunch of stuff missing, but we'll get that in a DLC or two's worth of content. Really, the grand majority of stuff that is missing for each of the individual races is mostly characters, and that can be solved with character packs, as, again, there's not that many missing units left. But Creative Assembly have stated time and time again that Warhammer 3 is going to be supported for many years to come, and, well, 4 years of a lifespan of Warhammer 2, and we've had a decent amount of DLC, and it is very much likely that we will get more DLC for Warhammer 3 than we did for Warhammer 2 if everything moves quickly and everyone starts returning to the offices and so on. They want to milk this, Games Workshop want to milk this, and, well, we want them to milk it because we do enjoy this series. So, then why the purpose of this video? Well, again, 8th edition is almost done, and that now brings in some new races and factions. Enter Grand Cathay, which we've been seeing on screen throughout this video so far. Grand Cathay itself, as we are aware, is one of the base game races for Warhammer 3, a massive shock to most as many people weren't expecting it. Keep in mind again, no army book in 8th edition, and they really haven't been updated much since, I want to say around 3rd or 4th. The fact is, yes, they've had lore, but their lore has been, well, very, very little when compared to any other races and factions. Some of you might compare it to the Vampire Coast, where, yes, they never had an army book, but they did have a supplement, and that was the main basis, the same as Kislev, whereas Cathay had nothing of the sort. This was a collaboration between Games Workshop and Creative Assembly, which was eventually proven in an interview that myself and Lord Master of Sotek did with Andy Hall. So why am I referencing Grand Cathay a lot here? Well, because of that, we're going to have to look at the world map for the Warhammer Fantasy world. You see, it's a massive world and Grand Cathay is very much on the right-hand side. We've spoken about this before, where we've seen possibility of DLC and so on, but now Games Workshop is the deciding factor here, which is rather interesting as, being able to create Grand Cathay is so far away from any other race that is established very heavily, they're going to need to fluff out the world. And it looks like they've already been doing so, possibly for Old World, but maybe also thinking ahead for future DLC content because they do make a profit from this. Now, when it comes to army books, they tend to write in lore which does have some relevance to the race or faction that you're playing. Unfortunately, nobody outside of Creative Assembly and Games Workshop has been able to see this book because Games Workshop, I guess, are trying to keep things on the wrap for the eventual Old World announcement for Cathay, which we know it's coming. Just say it. But the thing is that we do know that they have started working on some new lore, at least something very minor, by once again reconfirming the fact that the Tiger Men of Ind exist, there are snake-like blood nagas in the lands of KHURESH, and there is a nation to the east of Cathay which has also had some war efforts against them. Now I'm going to play a small clip from the interview with Andy Hall so you can hear that for yourself, as it is rather important and we will discuss that a little bit.
Things slip out, and Lee Dao, who's the Fire Dragon, ruler of the southern provinces and the Mountains of Heaven. So technically, he rules the Mountains of Heaven, where the Monkey King is.
Oh.
He's Master of the Burning Winds and Lord of the Phoenix. So the Monkey King is a constant thorn in the side of the Fire Dragon, and the two are often at odds. This amuses the Monkey King, especially as the Fire Dragon must often call upon his monkey warriors to defend the southern provinces of the Empire from Ind and the Nagas of KHURESH. So,
Oh, he said the thing. He said the thing.
He said the thing.
He said the thing.
and that's all I'm going to say about that thing.
Just that you said it. That's gonna power me through many days.
A lot of people, when they see this video, are gonna go wild.
Having the Monkey King in the mountains of heaven means that it's probably safer than purging that area and then having Ind or KHURESH just trawls through.
So, just a minor question. Obviously, we know that Cathay has had some issues with like KHURESH and Ind and so on. Is it safe to say they've also had issues with any possible nations to further east?
Yes, they have, and that's where the Jade Sea is, and the Grand Dragon fleets are of the. Did I say the Sea Dragon? I forgot. See, it always pops in and pops out my head. But the Sea Dragon, of course, the Sea Dragon. And that's kind of what she's there for, and she defends that eastern coast, and almost proactively goes out to sea with these dragon fleets, to sink pirates. Definitely, they've had issues with the Dark Elves along there, and there's other human nations I'm not going to name that they've had issues with.
So why exactly were these clips important? Well, as I said, this is basically them restarting the lore for Cathay, and Games Workshop have actively acknowledged all the surrounding countries and nations. The fact of the matter is, if it's the case that they want to build up Cathay, we're going to have a lot of blank space, aren't we? And let's be honest, none of us want Empire clones. In fact, a lot of people are going to get very mad at that. It still happens, even though there are quite good mods that supplement it. Some people prefer the normal official vanilla version. Now, since the lore has been acknowledging certain things like the Tigermen, they didn't have to acknowledge that, or the Naga of KHURESH, this means that Games Workshop and possibly Creative Assembly are flirting with the idea of at least making a DLC, or well, better yet said, multiple race packs. It comes with the idea of, they're going to run out of characters and units to eventually bring in from 8th edition, so they're going to have to think of other ways to milk it. Now, I did have a lot of questions regarding Nippon as to why he acknowledged it, but in a very mysterious manner. Well, simply put, I think that Cathay is going to act as the main test for everything. I've discussed this in many videos before. Seeing as Cathay is a complete reimagining of very little lore, they have to kind of test out to see if it's going to work for them before working on to Ind, KHURESH, and so on. Is that not true? And we've already gotten many hints from this interview regarding possible future DLC, because they mention a lot of units which we still don't have access to. We have to keep in mind that the roster for Cathay has already been released, and a lot of stuff that Andy did mention is not in that roster. So let's go back to the world map. Now, of course, we see where Cathay is. If Cathay works out well, then they'll want to see what they could do with other possible races and factions. At this point, they'll start looking towards other race packs, because by that point, we'll of course have the Ogre Kingdoms and the Chaos Dwarfs. It's very easy to imagine that we're going to have them very, very early. One is a very definite pre-order DLC, and the other one will follow shortly after. There's a lot of dead zones there, isn't there now? Ind and KHURESH are obviously the races which would be very close to Grand Cathay, and also close to others. Ind itself is just right next to the Darklands and the Mountains of Morns, so you'd think that they would be at least thought about, so, it's not just a generic faction fighting over there all the time. KHURESH has just been very heavily requested. I mean, there's a very popular fan project which garners a lot of attention too. All these types of things, comments and forum posts, and even fan projects, they get the attention of Games Workshop and they get the attention of Creative Assembly. It just makes sense. Now, regarding Nippon, the reason why I think that he was so mysterious about that is because maybe Nippon won't feature in the map at the very beginning. Very similar to that on Three Kingdoms, where a lot of areas were just kind of shaded over and you couldn't even go there, and then eventually opening it up if they see a reason to make Nippon a race. I could be wrong there, but it just kind of makes sense that they'll just darken out some areas. We had that a long time ago in Warhammer 1, which made no sense to me with Athiloran, but that was an 8th edition race. But say, for example, Three Kingdoms again, you know, the Nanman area, that was always kind of just fogged up and you couldn't go through there. It kind of makes sense, and there was also some stuff with other areas of Three Kingdoms, but the game got abandoned, so yeah. All I'm going to say is it's very obvious that Cathay is focus testing for other races, but then we have to think about the big factor. That is, of course, Games Workshop, who is currently making a new revival of Warhammer Fantasy known as Warhammer the Old World. Look, they're not going to put time and effort into creating a new race or faction for Total War Warhammer if they're not going to make money from it. In fact, we're completely aware that the units we're seeing for Kislev are going to be the ones that we're seeing for Warhammer the Old World. This is the cross-marketing they always wanted. This is very important, as not to sound a bit more sour or give Games Workshop a big I told you so, but if they were still in 8th edition, 9th edition, or moving on to 10th, they would be making a lot more money through cross-promotion than they are now. I hope they're feeling foolish, and this is obviously the reason why we're getting Warhammer the Old World. They realize that there's a lot of money that can be made, and well, we know that Cathay is getting a lot of stuff for Old World too. They don't have to outright say it, because they've already done it without saying it. We've had art there with the Old World logo. We know that Kislev is going to be like that too. So in the future, why not anything else? The most recent Old World update showed that they also started updating the lore for the Border Princes. Now, the Border Princes themselves are probably going to work as an open sandbox for you to build up your own armies, but there are some shields there which are Talian and Estalian, which is obviously giving us proof that they're going to start eventually going to announce the Dogs of War return or Southern Realms. Now, we all know it's coming, they don't have to say anything, but we know it's coming. Which would eventually lead to a Southern Realms DLC for Total War Warhammer 3, because it's going to be the same units, and that means that they can cross-promote and they can make a lot of money. At least I hope that they're thinking about it this way, because, yeah, let's be honest, they're not the smartest company in the world. So think about it this way, if they're going to start just filling out the world a little bit for Old World, that could then turn into DLC, which fits with the whole Creative Assembly statement of many years to come. So let's think about it this way, and we're going to go back to the world map for this, but we're going to color it in. What's colored in blue is stuff that we already have access to. The Empire, the Dwarfs, all that type of stuff. What's colored in red is what we're getting in Warhammer 3 when it eventually releases. What's coming in green is what we're expecting the at least 2 race packs for Warhammer 3 to be. So one of them being the pre-order, the Ogre Kingdoms most likely, and the other being the Chaos Dwarfs. Now, if Games Workshop and Creative Assembly are working together for possible future content, think about it this way. Let's put it in orange, and that's going to be Ind, KHURESH, and possibly Nippon in the future. It very much depends. But why stop there? Say, for example, Albion, if there's the demand for it. The Southern Realms is, of course, very heavily demanded. Araby, which I honestly think at this point would be mixed up with the Southern Realms as it kind of makes sense. That works too. So that's already a bunch of stuff. That's already a decent amount of DLC, and keep in mind that each of them has their own race packs or whatever. That's what their most expensive DLC is that. They charge an expansion's worth for a race pack. Say if we ended up getting one a year post everything else. So what, 5 years worth of content there? Just from that? Of course, then there'd still be Lord packs and possibly character packs in between. There's a lot of stuff which could be released. I have a theory, and the theory is very simple. We're going to see Cathay being tested with some DLC and so on, and how much the player base plays with it, they'll use to then gauge if they want to do Ind, KHURESH, or Nippon. Which I think is kind of silly, because it's apples and oranges, right? Yes, it's more human nations, but it's not exactly expected to play the same way. Some people are more excited for Ind than they would be Cathay, and so on. So, yeah. But I think that's how it's going to work, because that's what Games Workshop does. This is why they keep releasing Space Marines, Space Marines, Space Marines, Space Marines. It's because Space Marines sell. Whereas the other factions don't sell as much, so they're not too bothered with it. So what can you guys, the community, do to make sure that we eventually do get ins, Nippon, and so on? Well, I'm not going to tell you to play Cathay on launch and constantly play Cathay, because if you're not interested in Cathay, there's no reason for you to play it. Instead, keep vocal about what you want, especially after launch when people start speculating about the future again. Start mentioning Ind, start mentioning KHURESH, mention it as much as possible on the forums and all that. The more you're vocal about it, the more people are going to have to hear it. Obviously do this in a respectful manner and like don't harass the devs and so on. I think that hopefully goes without saying, but you never know. But many of us want a full and complete world, and hopefully we will get that in the future by the end of the series. It would be nice to have as many different cultures as possible. It's in the best interest of Creative Assembly, as obviously more DLC equals more money without having to make a complete new game again, and it's in the best interest of Games Workshop if they're actually thinking about fully fleshing out the lore of the world, which even as a big Warhammer Fantasy fan as I am, because believe me, I've been in this hobby for a long time now, yeah, a lot of the world still needs to be fleshed out properly, and this is the perfect time. Now more than ever. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very soon. Have a good day.